It's going now. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me here today. We're going to dive into talking all about accountability. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, this is a hot topic. This was one that came up over the holidays in my Facebook community with health coaches, just wondering about accountability. How does it work? How heavy-handed should we be about accountability? How do we really help our clients develop effective accountability measures? So I want to dive into all of that today and help you really get clear on what accountability is, what's the coach approach to accountability. We want to be coming from that place of the coach approach, and what are the steps and some tips that we can use to coach our clients around accountability. So we're going to cover all of that today. I do have a lot to share. Got 4 pages of notes here, I think. So I hope this is going to be a thorough and really valuable session today to get into this topic. So if you're on my email list, you know that I've been sort of asking, what kind of accountability partner or coach are you right now with your clients? Are you sort of the drill sergeant enforcer, demanding that your client be held accountable for their actions? Or are you more sort of the timid, shy mouse who really doesn't want to push your client? And maybe, if that's you, you're avoiding talking about accountability altogether. So, we have these different ends of the spectrum where people tend to fall, right? Depending on your style and depending on your, personality. There's no right or wrong here, but usually, we want to fall somewhere in the middle, right? We don't want to be too heavy-handed, demanding. And, we don't want to be at the other end where we're not actually even talking about accountability because we're afraid or we don't want to sound pushy, that kind of thing. So I think I fall somewhere in the middle. I really love accountability, and I feel like I've done a lot of work around this piece, around coaching my clients around it. So I do think that it is something that I'm, pretty passionate about and have spent a lot of time working on. So what I want to talk about first is just the mindset of accountability. Where are we coming from? How are we thinking about accountability? And really making sure that it's aligned with that coach approach, which I'm so passionate about. So one of my mentors and teachers, Dr. Michael Arlowski, he always teaches that the client is accountable to themselves, not the coach. So, and I think a lot of new coaches feel like, they need to be the ones delivering the accountability and, setting up those accountability measures. But, bottom line is we are not the accountability police. We're not the action step police. And we shouldn't be doing all the work. We shouldn't be doing all the checking in, all the following up and telling our clients what to do. That's not really the coach approach when it comes to accountability. So, of course, yes, we do provide accountability for our clients. It's a big part of why they hire us, and we are going to check in with them during that next session, and they're going to know that. However, I think we really want to help our clients develop their own accountability, have them become accountable to themselves is so important so that they develop that self-efficacy, because when our coaching relationship ends, we want to make sure that our client has developed some skills and habits so that they're able to continue making long-term behavioral change and sustaining the changes that they've already made. So it's really important for us to help them develop that self-accountability. So definitely we want to start by helping the client become accountable to themselves. And really, I think in coaching, this is the essence of accountability, that the client becomes accountable to themselves, not necessarily accountable to the coach, even though, yes, we will hold them accountable, if that makes sense. So I also want to say that accountability is one of the things that really differentiates coaching and health coaching from some of the other helping professions. A lot of them don't include accountability, right? They're the expert, they're telling people what to do, they're making recommendations, diagnosing and treating. They're not really talking about accountability. So that is a big part of what, differentiates us from some of those other helping professions. And it's a big value that we provide to our clients. And I think that's why, in working with students, I spend so much time talking about the action plan and the accountability plan, because so many new coaches, have a hard time understanding how they provide value to clients. And that's one area where I really think that we step up, where we can help the client come up with a really specific and measurable action plan and have that accountability built in there as well. So I think it's really, really important. And, for our clients, they may have tried time after time after time to make some of these dietary and lifestyle changes in their own life. And, maybe if they've done it themselves, maybe they've failed many times. So they finally hire a coach and they say, yes, you're going to finally help me do this. Right? So that accountability is what's going to help them finally succeed at making those healthy changes that they want to make in their life. So really a big part of why clients hire us. It's a big part of what they're paying for, what they value and appreciate about us as coaches, right? So while they want accountability, I don't think, they really want to be commanded by a drill sergeant or interrogated by the accountability police or, supervised by a nitpicky boss. That's not really the coach approach and the essence to coaching. Our clients don't want that, right? So we want to come at it from that coach-like approach, right? So a lot of accountability is about tone. It's about our language. It's about how we phrase the questions around accountability. It's about our mindset and approach, which all comes from the place of collaboration and working together with your client as an ally. You're that support system. And really what you are doing is you are helping them move through the real tough parts of behavioral change, right? You're helping them set that action plan and then actually get out there consistently in their life, doing the work, doing the actions so that they can achieve those short-term goals and the long-term goals that they have for their health and well-being. So that's the reason, it's the essence, it's why we're there. So like the coaching relationship, it's not the coach who empowers the client. It's the rapport, it's the trust, it's the neutrality and the equality that we bring to the coaching relationship that really empowers the client at the end of the day. So if we can come from that place around accountability, the client will feel empowered as well. So we trust, right? We get back to our coaching principles. We trust that the client is creative, resourceful, and whole, and they have the answers inside of them. And we're just going to bring that out by asking our high mileage questions and using our coaching tools and our structures and resources to guide them along. So we believe in them. We trust in them. And when they tell us that they're going to do something, we believe and honor that they were actually going to do it, right? That's where we come from as coaches. So like other aspects of coaching, the accountability part is client-led, it's client-driven, and it really honors that the client is the one in the driver's seat. It's not the coach. So they are responsible for their actions, right? So it's not the coach's responsibility to make sure that the client does what they say they're going to do. So I know that all sounds great, but how practically do we actually do that? And we are going to get to that in just a minute, because I know this is a tough one for new coaches, new health coaches to get their heads around, because if the client comes back time after time and they don't do the action steps, they're not following up on the homework. I know that coaches can feel like they're not doing their job, they're not providing value, they're, failures at their jobs, right? Or that they failed the client in some way. And so I really want you to know that that's, that's why accountability is so important, for us to do it in an effective way that truly honors the coach approach and supports the client. So another thing to remember in all of this is that we do have to be lovingly detached to the outcomes. We cannot guarantee outcomes for our client. We are not responsible for those. So if we can hold that in our minds as we're moving through, this piece around accountability and following up with our clients, I think that can alleviate some of the pressure that we put on ourselves around this. So let's talk, about what is accountability. What exactly is it? Particularly when it comes to health coaching, what are we talking about here? So essentially, accountability is all about just being responsible for your actions, for what you say you're going to do. So I know that in some circles, in some fields, accountability can have a negative connotation. It can feel sort of like, you must do X, or there will be, a consequence. There's a negative consequence coming out the other end, if you don't do what you say you're going to do. And I think that can happen a lot of times in workplaces. We get this negative connotation around accountability, maybe, with parents and children, with teachers and students. So that I think I just want to acknowledge that we can have that sort of negative feeling around accountability for sure. But when it comes to coaching and health coaching in particular, I do think it is what clients are paying us for. So if a client comes and they're actually willing to step into coaching and hire you as their coach, that's one of the reasons why. It's what they're looking from you, and they do see value in this part of the coaching process. So what we're helping them do is follow through on the things that are important to them. I just mentioned before, the short-term and those long-term goals, and helping them get there. So by offering that accountability, we really help our clients stick to those action steps and get to those goals, to get to that vision of where they want to be. So how, do we actually help our clients develop that self-accountability, and how do we build that into our coaching sessions? So coming back to my mentor, Dr. Michael Arlowski, he talks about, and I think this is such a great way to think about accountability, is he talks about loophole-free accountability. So that we're closing those loopholes, we're closing those escape routes that our clients might have. And so he's kind of developed this 5-step process for developing loophole-free accountability. And so that's what I want to share with you today. And what he means by that, I just mentioned, kind of closing those loopholes that the client can slip through, closing those escape routes or escape hatches, if you will, that, I can just find my way out of this somehow. So we're really, being thorough with it, so that our client can't sort of wiggle or slip out of the accountability plan that they've developed. So that's really the essence of that loophole-free accountability. And I want to acknowledge that might sound heavy-handed, right? So we're closing escape hatches and we're not allowing our clients to wiggle out of things. But it's typical, right, in the coaching process that the client's going to come up with excuses or stories, or just come back week after week, with, well, I just couldn't do it because this happened and then that happened and the week got away from me and, I just couldn't do it. So if that happens week after week after week, we're not really being effective with the accountability plan. We're colluding with our clients a little bit. We're letting them off the hook. So going through this process that Arlowski has developed, I think can really help us develop that effective accountability that we know at the end of the day our clients really want help with and support with. So that I think is the key here. We're helping them be effective and thorough so that they do, get through their action steps, accomplish them. We want our clients to be successful, and we know they can, right? So with this loophole-free accountability process, I think that helps us work through all the different aspects of it. So the way he describes this loophole-free accountability is by really including it in the action planning phase. So near the end of your coaching session, you're going to move into action planning. You're going to talk about, what the action steps are, what the plan is, and you're going to build accountability into that. Some coaching models have action planning and then accountability is separate, but I think it's nice to kind of be thinking about both of those things at the same time. So, of course, the first thing that we want to do is support our clients in establishing those action steps. What is the plan? What are the actions that they can commit to? And whenever we're in that phase, always what we're trying to do is make sure that it's not too big, that it's not too much, that we haven't, that they haven't come up with, 10, 15, 20 action steps that we know that they're not going to be able to accomplish. So number one, make sure that that action plan is not too big, it's not overwhelming, it's not too much. We can always remember, what's your golden goal? What's the number one thing you can accomplish and commit to this week? And if you accomplish all those other things, great, that's a bonus. But we want to make sure that there's absolutely one thing, a small step that they can absolutely commit to. So we want to get to that. We want to get to, that one or two action steps that we know they can do. We want to make sure that it's really clear and concrete on what they're going to do. What are they going to do? When are they going to do it? How are they going to do it? What time of day are they going to do it? How long is it going to take? So we're, getting really clear on that action plan. We're asking lots of follow-up questions to make sure that it's smart, right? The action step has to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and have some time frame around it. So it's really, really important. So that's the first step with the action plan, making sure that it's reasonable and doable. The second step with the action plan is to make sure that there's a plan B. So this is kind of getting into some of the accountability, getting into some of those escape routes. So we want to make sure that we're asking the client things like, what could get in the way of you accomplishing this goal? What are the obstacles or the challenges that you might anticipate coming up this week as you think about doing these action steps, right? So we want to come up with a plan B. We want to plan for those things. These are the contingency plans. And so if we're able to go through all the what if scenarios, what if this happens, what if this happens, what if that happens, and then we plan for those. So an example of this would be, maybe your client says that they want to go to the gym 3 times next week after work. So they're supposed to finish up work at 4 o'clock, get to the gym by 4:30, spend an hour, and then head home. So what happens if the client's at work and the boss comes at 10 to 4 and says, oh my goodness, I need you, Susie, to come in and join me on a conference call? Great, well, there goes, my plan to get to the gym. I guess I just won't go today. So this is the kind of thing you can plan around. So you can plan around with Susie to say, well, if that's a typical thing that happens, your boss comes to you at the last minute, what else could you do? So if you're at work for an additional half hour, maybe you can still get to the gym for 30 minutes, right? So maybe you have a shortened time to exercise that day. Maybe instead you just do a loop around the block at work. So you get a walk outside, get the pace up. So it's just looking at what are the things that could come up and how can we plan around those. Plan the plan Bs so that the client has a contingency plan and you've sort of looked at those escape routes, right? Instead of just blowing it off and not doing it at all, what can they do instead? So those are some important things to think about when you're helping the client establish their action step and their goal. The second part, the second step in developing this loophole-free accountability is to co-design the accountability. So this is where we get into, what exactly does the accountability look like? What will a client come up with to hold themselves accountable? So some really powerful questions that you can use in this step of the process are to ask questions like, how can I help you follow through and get this done? So how can I support you in that? You might also want to ask, how can I help you accomplish this? So very similar, how can I help you follow through? How can I help you accomplish this? What is the best way to handle the accountability around this, right? Again, we're keeping the client in the driver's seat. We're asking them about the accountability plan. Another question is really, a simple one. How will you hold yourself accountable for this? So how are you going to go away and make sure that you follow through and accomplish this? So those are some nice, when I talked about language and tone, that's sort of the coach-like approach, as opposed to, how are you going to keep me informed of this? How are you going to tell me that you did this? It's not about keeping me, the coach, informed. How are you going to make sure that you are able to follow through with this? So co-designing the accountability. So I want to talk about, what are some types of accountability? What are the things that we would be looking for here and helping the client come up with? So it all, number one, depends on your client. Are they someone who, doesn't need a lot of extra accountability? Once they say it out loud, they're good to go. Or maybe your client, you find, comes up with excuses, never really does what they say they're going to do. Maybe there's someone who does need a little bit more, so we have to gauge our clients and see what style, what type of accountability is going to work for them. So like I said, maybe for some clients, saying it out loud is enough. So maybe they just, might say, well, I'm just going to tell you next time what I did, and that's going to be great. So we really just want to make sure that we're fitting the accountability to the client. And of course, that we're not committing to too much as well from our end of things. So we just want to keep experimenting things and see how it works. Talking generally about accountability in, our first session, during a foundation session, can be really helpful too. Just, how do you like to be held accountable? What have you done in the past around accountability? What's your style around accountability? Do you need more or less? So really gauge that at the beginning of the coaching relationship so that you have a sense of what that need is going to be from the client. So let's talk specifically about some types of accountability. So like I said, your client may be good with, I'll just check in with you next time. I'll tell you what I did. Maybe they're just going to send you a quick email or a text once they've accomplished whatever it was they're going to do. Or maybe they send a revisit form, a little prep check-in email before your session to let you know what happened and what went well. Those are all great forms of accountability. Your client could also look to somebody else in their life. So maybe they're going to have a conversation with their partner to let them know, this is what I'm going to work on this week. Can you hold me accountable? Can you ask me how I'm doing around that? Maybe they have a buddy or a friend that they're going to go for walks with, and that person will really act as an accountability partner. So maybe it's about another person in your client's life that can help them with the accountability. So that's great. We also want to talk about, calendarizing and making sure that your client is getting those action steps into their calendar. So booking it like it's an appointment. So it's there, they see it, there's a reminder, there's a time frame around it. That's a great form of accountability. So if your client says, well, I'm going to go away and I'm going to put that, that I'm going to go for a run 3 days a week at 3 p.m. in my calendar, I'm going to book it like an appointment. Great. That's a great way that they're going to hold themselves accountable to that. Another big part of accountability is tracking. So how is your client tracking their progress? So this is really important and works well for routine activities, things that they're going to be doing on a repetitive basis, on a continuous nature, a certain amount of times per week. So, finding a way to track that. So it's great for your client to go away and say, I'm going to meditate, 4 days this week. Okay, well, how are you going to track that? How are you going to put it down in black and white and then, let me know next week exactly what you did? Because a lot of times, we self-deceive ourselves. We say, oh yeah, I exercised every day. But really, if you had tracked it, you think, well, maybe you got 2 out of 4 days, right? So, we tend to overemphasize and over think really optimistically about what we did. But when it's written down in black and white, that can really raise a lot of awareness for your clients about how often and actually how much they are doing. Can reduce some of that self-deception because it's there in black and white, they can see it. So there's all kinds of ways for our clients to track their accountability, their action steps, their progress. It could be as simple as, tick marks on a calendar, the days of the week, and they do a little check mark when they've completed it. I have developed a weekly tracker for my clients. So, whatever the activity is, we've just developed, those weekly days, and they can check those off and kind of keep that on their fridge or in their daytime or somewhere that they're going to see it and remember to check those off. Also, as we know now, there are so many apps and things that clients can use to track their progress from, every health activity we could ever imagine. There's an app for that, right? So maybe your client's wanting to track their food and their calories. So MyFitnessPal would be a great way to do that. Maybe your client's trying to track their emotional eating and their mood and their food. So maybe they're doing that as a form of a food diary, just in a journal. Again, this doesn't have to be elaborate. Tracking accountability can be very, very simple, but you want to make sure it's really aligned with what's going to work for your client. And you may need to experiment. They may need to experiment with a few different things before they find what works. So those are definitely some items that can really, really help, but it's there in black and white. They see what they've done. And so they can come back to you next week and feel really confident about, here's what I did and I've tracked it. So that's about co-designing the accountability. Again, allowing the client, just like with the action steps, the client comes up with their action steps, the client's coming up with the accountability plan, but you're absolutely asking them about that. So the third step in this process around loophole-free accountability is working on closing those escape routes. So I talked a little bit about this, and we can, do those backup plans and those plan Bs when we're talking about the action steps, which is important. But we also want to make sure that the accountability is really specific. So we're not just allowing the client to go away with, I'll figure something out, I'll find a way. We want them to have a specific plan, because the more specific, the more detailed we can be, the more successful your client can be in terms of knowing exactly what that looks like. I know exactly what I'm going to do when I leave the session today, when I'm going to do it, how I'm going to do it, and all of those good things are really talked about. So, closing the escape routes is just really helping your client narrow and nail down exactly what they're going to do. So, they've thought it through, they've nailed it down, they've explained it to you, and so you have it there as a plan on what they're going to do. So if you start hearing excuses from your client, well, I know I'd like to do it X amount of times, but, or, well, this is always happening. And so those yes ands and those yes buts and those what ifs, those are clues for us to say, I have a feeling here my client's not really committing to this. Also, if they say, well, yeah, I'll try to do that this week, we know that they're probably planning on not doing it, right? So we want to use and listen for those words, those flags, and really, call our clients out on it a little bit. Again, we don't want to be heavy-handed. We're just being curious. And we're coming from that place of, I really want to talk this through with you so that you have a solid plan that feels good for you. So when you leave our coaching session today, you feel really excited and able to complete this action plan that you've come up with. So closing those escape routes is really important. The fourth step is, what if we come up with an action plan, an accountability plan, where the client is going to text the coach, every time after they've gone for the run? Well, what happens if during the week the coach does not hear from the client? So the client just doesn't do it. You want to talk about that, right? So you want to say to the client, well, what happens if I don't hear from you? So I know this feels a little bit like consequences, but it's not about, persecuting or, having some negative outcome here. what we want to do is, maybe there's a problem, maybe there's an issue. What do you want me to do to support you if I don't hear from you? So just asking that question, seeing what the client comes up with, and then again, you're coming up with another backup plan. Okay, well, if that doesn't happen, then we'll do this. And so maybe then, the fifth step could be that you do offer to connect. I will commit to, sending you one reminder, or I will follow up on Wednesday. If I was meant to hear from you Monday, Tuesday, haven't heard from you by Wednesday, I will follow up with just a quick little check-in. So, you as the coach can commit to helping with some of that. But then again, I checked in, I sent you the reminder. What if now I don't hear from you? So again, just the what ifs, let's go through all the different scenarios to make sure, again, that there's a really solid, effective, escape-free, loophole-free plan that the client feels good about. That's really going to support them in being successful. That's where all of this is coming from. So I hope that helps. That's sort of those 5 steps around loophole-free accountability. I think, within that, it's really those top 3 steps that are so important. Establishing the goal and the action plan that's realistic and doable, co-designing the accountability, making sure that you've come up with that plan that works, and looking at the types of accountability, and then looking at, closing those escape routes, planning for the plan Bs and all those what ifs. So I think those are really the important parts of that process. So I want to address this because I know it came up in my community. A lot of people are wondering about, well, what if the client just says to you, well, coach, I want you to hold me accountable. I want you to text me. I want you to email me. I want you to send me reminders and follow up. So what do we do in those instances? Because it's hard for the coach to say, well, I'm not going to do that. You're responsible for that. So how can we do that in a coach-like way? So we could say something like, well, thanks for asking that. What I found works best is instead of me being responsible, to remind you to do your meditation, to go for your run, whatever it is, I think what's more helpful is for you to find a way to, be accountable, to remember, to actually do that action step, whether it's to go for a run, do your meditation, eat more healthily, and then let me know when you've accomplished it. So I'll just repeat that. What I've found works best is instead of me being responsible, to remind you that you find a way to hold yourself accountable and remember to practice or remember to do your action step, and then let me know what you've accomplished. How does that sound? So you're really just, again, very, gently, kindly honoring the client. You're putting it back on them. You're empowering them to find a way. So maybe the client would say, okay, sure. So should I just email you, after I've done the action step? And as a coach, you could say, well, let's, figure out a plan that works best for you. You could email me back after each time you've done your action step. We could set up certain days of the week that you're meant to check in and send me an email. You could send me a quick text after you're done your action step. What would be best for you? So as the coach, you could offer some suggestions. If the client's not sure how they're going to handle this, you could offer a few suggestions and then allow the client to decide what is going to work best for them. What would be the most effective, the easiest thing for them to do? So that's how we would handle that one. So in wrapping up today, what I want to do is I've sort of come up with some do's and don'ts around accountability, and I thought that would be a nice way to sort of reiterate and highlight some of the key points around, being an effective accountability partner with your health coaching clients. So here are the do's that I came up with. I've got 6 do's here. So do talk about accountability early on in the coaching relationship. So at your foundation session, you might want to include it in your agreement, but definitely talk about it early on. What works for them? What style do they like? What have they done in the past? And really get a sense of what's going to be effective for them. Do be consistent. This is an absolute must do. So if you've said to the client, I will follow up with you on Monday, absolutely you must do that. If you say to the client, I will ask you about this at our next session, you absolutely must do that. If you do not do this, this is going to start to break down the trust in the coaching relationship. So whatever you have committed to, you must do it and you must be consistent with it. So really, really important for the coach to do that. If you just, forget about it and don't do it, oh, that's not a big deal, your client will not become empowered by the coaching relationship because they know that they can't trust you. You are not upholding your part of the agreement. So really, really important to be consistent. The third do I have is do help the client discover what works for them. So we just went through some ideas, brainstorm ideas, come up with a list of different things that they could be doing. And then again, allow them to choose the best accountability for them. Number 4 is do place the responsibility for accountability on the client. It is not your responsibility. What is your responsibility is to talk about it, to bring it up, to include it in your action planning. 100%. The coaching process and structure is on you, the coach. So absolutely bring it up, but place the responsibility for the follow-up, for the actual action taking and the accountability process on the client. They need to become accountable to themselves. The 5th do I have is do be an ally, not the adversary, right? Keep it light, keep it fun, keep it coming from that experimental mindset. We're just trying these things out. We're going to see what works, in order for you to be successful at getting to those short and long-term goals. And my final one, my 6th do is do remember that you are not the client's boss. You're not their parent, the teacher, the disciplinarian. You are not the action step or the accountability police, right? You don't want to be that enforcer, that drill sergeant. So do remember that, that's not who you are. You're coming from that coach approach that you trust and believe that your client is going to do what they say they're going to do. So let's flip it around to some of the don'ts, the things that we should not be doing when it comes to accountability. So don't do it all for them, right? Don't take on the responsibility for all of that accountability. Some of the coaches in my group were talking about, well, I send them this and I send them that and I do a reminder and then I do a follow-up. It is not your responsibility to do all of that. Do not do all of the accountability for your client because then they will never develop their own accountability. So don't do it all for them. Don't overpromise either, in terms of what you're going to do. Make sure that if you're coming up with a brainstorming list, you're absolutely able to commit to stuff. If you don't want your client texting you every day, don't suggest that as an accountability measure, right? So don't overpromise what you can do and what you are committing to do. Don't be the accountability police. I just sort of talked about that one at the end there of my dues. Absolutely you want to check in with them, but you're not there with every last thing and, drilling them. It's not an interrogation, right? It's all coming from the place of how, what were you successful around? What did you learn? What can we do better next time? My other don't is don't collude and let the client off the hook. So collusion is all about when we start to buy into the client's story, buy into their feelings. We're saying things like, oh, that's okay, don't worry, it's not a big deal. So you're really buying into their story if they say, well, I had such a rough week and this and this and this happened, and you're just like, oh, no problem, it's not a big deal. So you're kind of colluding with them, right? You're not really supporting them in moving forward. So you're sort of feeling a bit sorry for them, maybe. You're pitying them. You're even judging them, right? This is not coming from that coach approach. It's not coming from that place of, I believe that you are creative, resourceful, and whole. You have the answers inside of them. You really want to come from that place. So you're coming from unconditional positive regard. We're holding our clients to the highest standard for themselves. We're holding that highest vision for them. So that's where we're coming from, not from this place of collusion that it's okay, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. Well, they're hiring you to provide accountability and support to move toward their goals. So it is a big deal if you just always let them off the hook and that they're never actually getting to those action steps. So instead, instead of colluding, what we do is we really get curious about what happened. Tell me what happened. Tell me what got in the way. Is this a typical pattern for you? What did you learn from this? What can we do differently next time? Was the goal too big? Did you try to do too much? Was the accountability not effective, right? So we're looking at all of those different things when we do that accountability check-in to make sure that we're really honoring, our client, we're holding them to their highest, and that we're helping to move them forward. So my final don't is don't get too attached to the outcomes. So you as the coach, I know you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. I feel like a failure, how do I hold my client accountable? What if they don't do their action steps? I'm not doing my job. I'm not a good coach. We are not responsible for the outcomes. We really have to be lovingly detached. We love our clients. We believe in them. We want them to make progress. But we cannot guarantee those outcomes. We can't guarantee results, and we can't do it for them. So become lovingly detached and remember that coach approach and honor the client. So that was a lot today. I love this topic of accountability. I hope these tips have been helpful for you. If you have any questions at all, please post them in the comments below and I would be happy to answer them. And as a sort of follow-up and part 2 to this, next week here on our Facebook Live, I'm going to go through how we do the accountability check-in. So how do we follow up on our next session with the client around accountability? So I'll give you some tips and some questions that you can ask and really how to go through that accountability check-in. So thanks so much for tuning in today, everyone. This has been great. Hope it's been helpful, and we will see you next time. Have a great week. Bye for now.